Today I'm going to do a video on sharpening the blade on the hedge trimmer. It's a Homelite Shrub Shaper 21 inch. Not really the best quality. It doesn't like to start when it's hot. I have to refuel it while it's running. If it stops running, I have to let it cool down totally. Usually the next day it'll start right up. The next day it starts beautifully cold. It runs beautifully. I'll fill it with gas and let it idle while I'm eating lunch. It'll idle for like an hour. It just runs perfect, other than it will not start hot. It's been back to Homelite numerous times when it was new. I've rebuilt the carburetor. I've taken it apart and put all new gaskets and seals on the power head and made sure the crank wasn't leaking or anything. It just does not start hot. It's just a poor design. It has spark, it just doesn't get fuel. When you crank it without the air filter, it puffs out little puffs of smoke out the carburetor like it's vapor locked the crankcase or something, and it's just purging out the carburetor. But you just keep it running. If it does stall, if you pull it instantly, it'll restart. If you let it sit 4 or 5 minutes, it will not restart until it's totally cooled off. And I put a GoPro mount on my bench so I can mount the GoPro to do a little video of how to sharpen the blade. This blade has curves, so I use the Dremel. If you have a flat one, you can just use a flat file to sharpen the blade. Well, we'll see how this mount works for the GoPro. This is what I use. This is on my Dremel. It's just a small sanding disc, or drum I should say, and you just kind of, I work it around. As you can see, the cutter, you have to move it to get to the other one, so I usually do it like that, full length, move it like that, and do the full length both on this side the second time around. Just easier to do it. I do like to hang it off the edge of the bench a little bit. Hopefully this shows off the edge of the bench a little bit. I'll turn the camera up. There we go. Probably was a little noisy doing that. I don't know if the Dremel's going to mess up the camera or not, but we'll soon find out, won't we? Kind of try and stay the same angle that was there. I like to just, and the Dremel makes it a lot quicker. And you can use a little file for chainsaw chain, but this is much quicker. And it's mainly the cutters here. You don't need to sharpen so much inside of here as you do here. This is the cutting surface from like there to the tip. Sometimes these get a little, this part gets a little chewed up and you got to file on, but this one's pretty good shape. So we're just going to go around and sand these. I like to, you know, when you feel them they're sharp, they're good. That way you don't get bruising or any problems on your plants and your trimmer. And it's really important to keep things sharp. You can see it goes along fairly quick. It is time consuming. If you do it with a file, it's a lot more time consuming. And this drum sharpened it last year that I'm using again this year. So it lasts quite a while. So you can kind of see the way you sharpen it with the Dremel. And if you sharpen it with a chain file or chainsaw, they're a little more time consuming, because let's see here, I sharpened to this one. You can tell where you sharpened and where you didn't because they're much shinier. But I mean, you can see you're going to be here for a while sharpening with a saw chain sharpener. and it's hard to get in there. And a rat tail files is too big. This is the chainsaw sharpener files the same dimension, the full length. It doesn't get narrower at the tip or wider back here by the handle. I'll do a chainsaw sharpening video in the future. This will give you a little better insight into what I was talking about. You can see how these are curved, and this is the part that cuts from there to there. This doesn't really cross anything to cut in here, so that's not really that important. You can sharpen it if you want, but it's not as important as this surface right in here, and of course when you do the other side right in here. And this surface here, I'll push it back. This surface here, if it gets messed up sometimes, just to clean the edge up just so it doesn't bugger this up. But this, if you keep that sharp like a razor, this thing will cut anything. You can do boxwood with it, which generally you don't want to use a gas-powered hedge trimmer on a boxwood. You should use hand clippers because it makes them brown on the edges of leaves and stuff. But if you have these razor sharp, you can get away with doing boxwood. The better hedge trimmers, they'll have a straight, the blade will come out straight, and you just hit them with a flat file, just kind of with a flat file just to keep them sharp. Not a real coarse one, kind of a fine one. I have a one that goes on a pole that has the flat cutters. It's super easy to, a lot easier to sharpen than this one. I would buy a, if you're going to go out and buy a gas-powered hedge trimmer, just spend the money and buy the steel and be done with it. I had an old Homelite blower that still works great. It's probably better than 30 years old, and so I thought, well, it was pretty good, so I bought this new probably in the, that'll take a while to guess, maybe around 97, 98. I'd have to go get the manual and see when the date of purchase was. But yeah, it's not been, you know, it works great, but it, like I say, the issue with it starting hard hot, it won't start hot. It's not starting hard hot. It will not start hot. You got to let it cool down completely. I usually sometimes overnight, and then I'll start right up first or second pull. It's been like that since it's been brand new. And it's been back to Homelite. I've gone through it and I give up on it. I'm just going to use it until it craps out, and then I'll go buy a nice steel. Still actually in pretty decent shape. It's got a Zama carburetor on it. So I'll go through and finish up the cutter, and then maybe we'll crank it up. And I don't have anything really demo cutting on right now, but we can crank it up, make sure it runs. I haven't run it yet this year. It's been stored up in the attic all winter. The blade is all sharp. I did take the guard off and the handle, just two screws, pop that off. That way you can get to these cutters up here a little easier. Or you can take the cutter off. You take out these 4 screws, this plate lifts off. Take out these 2 screws, the cutter lifts off. The clutch and the gearbox is in there. I've replaced the cutter on this in the past, so I've put new grease in there. I use Tecumseh bentonite grease in the gear case to keep it lubricated. And so put the guard back on. We'll take it out and give it a shot. I always, as I sharpen it, I run my finger on these just to feel them, make sure they're sharp. Because when you sharpen them, you're wearing a little bit of that surface away right there. They eventually get too small and you got to replace the cutter. And this cutter is no longer available through Homelite, so I find them on eBay. I got a few extras. I'll probably have more cutters and this thing will last. But maybe not, I don't know, it just keeps going and going and going. I thought maybe I'd get 5 years out of it, and here it's close to 20 years old and still works pretty good other than no start when it's hot. That's my only complaint with it. So I'll throw the garden stuff back on it. We'll take it out and crank it up for the first time. Last time I think it was run was back in September after Labor Day sometime. So here we go. I'll put her back together and take it outside. The drum I use is a 1/4 inch wide, 1/2 inch long, maybe about, I don't know what grit it is, maybe 120. This is the one I've sharpened the cutter twice with it. I sharpened it last year and this year. Time to replace it. It's pretty worn out. It's like maybe a 400 grit right now. Not much grit left to it. This is the Dremel kit I used. The one I used was 120 grit. I don't know if you can see that. It says 120 and it has 60 grit. And there's the drums. And it was 120 grit that I used on it. Well, we'll give the hedge trimmer a go here. The camera's stuck to the window, so I hope it works. It says to push the primer 8 times. I usually just push it until it's got fuel in the carburetor. It's not necessary to do it 8 times. Well, the tank is pretty empty, so I don't know what. Put the choke on, turn the switch on, pull the throttle. See what it does. It hasn't been started in a while.